Stamford to our first ever charity debate. My name is Sam Hughes and I'll be chairing this afternoon's charity debate. Beside me is Olivia Cross, who will be timing the debate. 2 years ago, SES held a charity debate to raise money for the local mental health charity Mindspace and to compete for the Oswald Elliott Charity Debating Cup, named in honour of Oswald Elliott, an Old Stamfordian who gave his life during World War I and was involved with the debating society whilst he was at school. The debate was a great success, and after a year when debating has often been online, it's great to be able to welcome a live audience back to the SHS Hall. In a year where COVID has taken a toll on everyone's mental health, we're delighted to be raising money again today for Mindspace, founded by Stanford GP, Dr. Patrick. Mindspace has grown in size and scope over the last few years. At a time where a number of schools are introducing esports fixtures and hiring esports coaches, the motion for today's debate is very relevant and has obvious links to mental and physical health. This House believes that esports should be part of the 21st century curriculum for school sports. I'd now like to move on to the debate itself by introducing our debaters for this afternoon. On my right, representing the proposition and the Old Stamfordians are Tom Watson and Oscar Dixon-Spain, who were both debating captains whilst in the sixth form at Stanford. Tom has just completed his first year at Warwick University, studying physics and maths, and Oscar has just completed his first year as a medical student at Liverpool University. Please can we give them a round of applause. On my left, representing Stanford Endowed Schools and the opposition, are Millie and Kitty Henderson. Millie is currently in Year 13 and one of this year's debating captains. Kitty, in Year 12, was part of the SES team that reached the national finals for the English-speaking Union Schools debating in March. Please can we also give them a round of applause. Please also welcome our adjudicators for the debate this afternoon. Mr. Phelan, Mr. Gallup, Mrs. Sharman, Head of History and Higher Education and Teacher in charge of debating at SHS, and Mr. Nady, Director of Sports and Performance. Thank you for giving up your afternoon to judge, and we hope it will be an entertaining and informative debate. The motion before the House this afternoon is, this House believes that esports should be a part of the 21st curriculum for school sports. On my right, representing the proposition are the first speaker, Tom Watson, and the second speaker, Oscar Dixon-Spain. Speaking for the opposition are the first speaker, Kitty Henderson, and the second speaker, Millie Murison. The summing up speeches will be done by Kitty and then Tom. After the main speeches, there will be a question time style floor debate, where you, the floor, can ask the teams questions and they can give immediate replies. This will be followed by a summing up speech and an audience vote on the judges' adjudication. As chairman, I will allow points of information but no heckling. Points of information may be made by main speakers, but not in the first or last minute of the speech. No points of information may be made during the summing up speeches. Main speeches will be timed and should be no longer than 7 minutes. Summary speeches should be no longer than 4 minutes. I now call upon the first speaker for the proposition, Tom, to begin the debate. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, live audience, new thing, that's quite weird. I would like to welcome you today and thank you very much for letting us come back. Today, Oscar and I will be proposing to you that esports should be part of a modern school curriculum. We believe esports should be played in all schools. They should be organised similarly to sports already practiced at schools. There should be timetable slots to play sports, school fixtures and extracurricular sessions. Also, we propose that schools may choose, importantly, which esports they would like to teach in the same vein as traditional sports. And most importantly, esports should not replace existing traditional sporting activity. Today, I shall define what we mean by esports, the mental benefits of playing esports, and how they can improve the whole school curriculum, while Oscar will compare regular sports to esports and the commercial side of the esports industry. So what are esports and why are we talking about it? Esports in themselves is a hard term to define, much like the regular definition of sport. Simply put, esports are a diverse array of competitive games that we can play against each other over the internet. Maybe. As these three definitions on term vary, we invoke a more common sense definition. If there is a community allowing for the playing of these games in a competitive way, and that the given game requires skill, determination and hard work, then to us, they qualify as esports. And with most universities promoting esports societies and unions, we should be discussing them and allowing our students to be part of this ever-growing community. When talking about esports, people often want examples as to know what we're talking about. So Oscar and I will focus on the more popular examples today, such as Counter-Strike, Valorant, Rocket League, Dota 2 and League of Legends, all of which are team-based games with large numbers of spectators at events, similar in number to many of the larger traditional sports and bigger than some of the smaller ones. Most successful esports have extremely high skill ceilings and steep learning curves, requiring hundreds of hours of experience to play well. It is for these reasons that we must consider allowing them to be played in schools and allow our pupils to excel in this new arena of the digital age. We cannot be left behind as cantankerous red-faced lovers. We should realise that almost every aspect of our lives has been revolutionised by the digital age, and that there should be no reason why traditional sports should not follow. Now that the semantics out of the way, I shall show you the mental benefits of playing esports. With playing esports, we are able to train our minds. Increasingly, the effects of playing esports has been researched. A recent study at Brown University in the US found that playing games increase a subject's ability to complete visual tasks, such as picturing and rotation. Yes?
It's when found that playing multiplayer games actually decreases achievement in penalty for exams, so how do you...
Where's that one? Exactly, okay. So what we have here is a typical case of finding a random statistic on the internet, not looking at the source of who commissioned it, and then not even looking at the sample size. We cannot use that study in any way, shape or form. This is what we need to build a logical argument, and that's why Oscar and I base our argument on logic and reasoning rather than solely on statistics. So, we also see that esports help develop our problem-solving skills, increase our processing speed, enhance our memory, and our ability to multitask. There's also a link between playing esports and the prevention of Alzheimer's. So there is evidence, yes, from sources, but we'll go into develop that in a minute, that esports helps develop our minds, completely contradictory to what the opposition has just said. So clearly, statistics can't always be relied upon. But we can also conclude that playing esports increases a person's communication skills. Much like any traditional team sport, by playing team-based esports with others, you learn how to communicate effectively. No, thank you. Whether that be learning how to constructively criticise someone or being able to plan an elaborate scheme to win a round. When we tell people to play sports, one of the go-to reasons is that you learn to work as a team. Team-based esports are the exact same, and this is a fantastic reason to allow our school pupils to play them. It's also worth noting that those who are unable to play traditional team sports, maybe due to disability, that they can do this online as part of the esports curriculum, learning those skills that otherwise they might not. No, thank you. So I have shown you that esports develop our minds and help us to learn to effectively communicate with each other. To say that esports is a waste of time and inferior to traditional sports is a complete divergence from the truth. Also, why then should we ignore them and deprive our students of organised competition around a platform that greatly benefits their mental agility and social skills? This complements my next point very nicely, how adding esports to the school day can improve the whole school curriculum. Not only do esports increase our mental capability and therefore our ability to learn, but by playing esports we are able to unwind after a long school week, which allows us to work more effectively. This is one of the reasons why we have traditional sports as part of of curriculum. Furthermore, esports directly benefits our learning of STEM subjects. By playing games, a player must delve into the world of statistics so they can improve their play style and find optimal strategies. This is mathematics and data analysis in action, skills that are increasingly valuable in today's technological age. Also, by playing esports, especially for younger children, pupils become more aware and proficient at using technology, which isn't a bad skill to have today. A study by the University of California said that esports can be a gateway to interest and affiliation with schools, improve STEM learning and interest, and create a positive relationship with peers and adults. One school life, therefore, goes together with this new digital arena of sporting success. Moreover, we do need to make it very clear that we do not want the abolition of traditional sport, that esports goes hand in hand with traditional sport, as many of the top teams require their players to work in the gym or go and join a team sport to enhance their physical capabilities. This is not one or the other, it's a very mixed bag. It's obvious as well, the reason why parents get their children to play traditional sports is it helps them to deal with adversity, develop competitiveness, form friendships, learn how to win and to lose, and show them the value of commitment. This can all happen on the digital platform, Player Esports. By adding esports to the school curriculum, we enable our students to go further, learn more, and to enjoy more. If we can see the unquestionable skill that chess players need, and can recognise the sheer determination that rugby players have, then why do we look down upon our esports men and women for showing the exact same laudable skills? Ladies and gentlemen, today I've explained to you why allowing our pupils to compete with each other by playing esports is the next logical step of our digital age. How esports are good for your mental agility, how they accompany the traditional school day and aid our learning, and how esports help our ability to communicate and stay in touch with each other. Ladies and gentlemen, join us in the digital age of competition and camaraderie. Thank you.
I thank Tom for his remarks. We shall now hear the first speaker for the opposition, Kitty.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kitty, and alongside my partner Millie, we will be opposing the motion that this House believes esports should be a part of the 21st century curriculum for school sports. In my speech, I'll be covering the practical side of our argument, including the economic cost of esports for our government, the issues of the values of certain video games in school environments, and the impact of schools on our Earth environment. My partner Millie will then go on to discuss how this motion can be detrimental to our health, both physically and mentally. But first, I'd like to offer some points of rebuttal. Now, the proposition's definition is already extremely problematic. How do you suggest that we integrate esports into our school curriculum then, if you're not going to make them replace natural sports? Would there realistically be enough space, with already statistics coming out that lots of state school students don't have enough time for maths and English? There was also an idea that how brilliant the team playing skills are, but why not encourage more students to take part in actual natural sports, which already increases team playing skills, but also has the benefits of physical no thank you and health benefits in addition. There was also a mention that it will be a new site for disabled children to participate in sports, but it's not fair to force disabled children into esports. We need to find solutions so that they can also play in traditional sports. Firstly, I'd like to discuss how unfeasible the motion would be, as the cost for the government would be far too high. The cost I will show you would be the cost that if this motion was to put in place in only secondary schools. So currently we have 3,500 state-funded secondary schools within the UK. Schools in the US who have esports facilities from international companies estimate that the start-up fee to build esports facilities for only 15 students is at least £29,500. Therefore, for each state secondary school in the UK to have an esports facility for 15 students, it will cost £101 million to appoint.
Roughly £500 million, and that's just a whole position. Compared to 29,000, which is a bit of an overestimate anyway. Clearly, one of the leaders that achieved.
I understand your point, but realistically, it's not an overestimate. This is statistics from international companies, and a hockey pitch is permanent. Hockey pitches don't change every couple of years, unlike technology. our government physical education allowance, an allowance that could be spent on better sports facilities for all students, both able-bodied and disabled, an allowance that could be spent on ensuring more girls continue to play sports, an allowance that could be spent on ensuring that our country stays fit and healthy, instead being suggested to be spent on an activity that arguably boasts none of these benefits. Secondly, I'd like to discuss the suitability of video games within the school environment. The example of the game that I should be using is the game Overwatch, which was used by the Digital Schoolhouse tournament in the UK in 2018. This game has been flagged by many female players for its hypersexualisation of female characters which have made them uncomfortable. In addition, it's been accused of cultural appropriation with regards to its Hindu gods and Native American characters, so thank you. In addition to this, it is a game that is based solely on shooting other people, encouraging violent behaviours in students. Why is this game being used then in the school tournament, you may ask? Well, quite simply, there is nothing less sexist, less racist, or less violent to be used in a school tournament. And there is no incentive to video game companies to create new games, as these games with these types of values generate millions of pounds. The values in these games are outrageous in their own right, but to implement them into our school curriculum would be inappropriate, as it would be condoning these types of behaviours. The teaching materials that we should use in schools should reflect the values that we want our students to represent. If these values manage to ingrain themselves into our education system, it is presenting bad ethics to all students. It was Nelson Mandela who once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which can change the world." So let us not have this honourable ethics seep into our education system, brainwashing future generations. Finally, I'd like to enlighten you into the environmental damage esports can produce. In a time of frightening statistics for all aspects of the world's health, the motion clearly has no place in our future towards a healthier planet. Heavy gamers use 1,100 kilowatt hours per year, which equates to about £2,000 worth of carbon dioxide emissions. Heavy gamers are defined as people who spend more than 12 hours a week playing esports. Therefore, if we revert back to my original setup, with each school having only 15, each of these 15 setups will be used each over, meaning that each school could be looking at producing around £30,000 worth of carbon dioxide emissions on top of their already emissions. The proposition today might claim that gaming is becoming far more eco-friendly. However, the future of gaming in esports is leading towards cloud gaming, which is a type of streaming service for gaming. This requires an increased usage of data centres. This is highly problematic. Data centres already contribute 2% of the global greenhouse emissions. In 20 years, they are already predicted to produce 14% of emissions. This increase in esports already will lead to an increase in data centres and more greenhouse gas emissions. So, to briefly conclude my arguments from today, esports are far too costly, too inappropriate, and too environmentally damaging to ever be placed into our school sport curriculum. I thank you for your time and attention.
And now I'll call upon the second speaker for the proposition, Oscar, to complete the proposition space.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on from my partner Tom, I shall be talking about the crucial comparison of esports to traditional sports using medical literature to outline the inherent risks of the latter. To follow from this, I will then be outlining the career prospects of both esports and traditional sports, along with the critical physical components of each. On to my first point, ladies and gentlemen. The health risks associated with traditional sports are far greater than those associated with esports. And I wish to reiterate what Tom said earlier in his speech. While some traditional sports can be dangerous, we do not dispute the value of physical activity. We are simply demonstrating the inherent severe medical risks students already expose themselves to when partaking in some traditional sports. But first, I'd like to take issue with some of the points raised by the opposition. So first, how we integrate it into the curriculum. Esports would be an option in sport choices for pupils, just like every single other traditional sport. So that's how you integrate it in. You can have a balance of both. And like Tom said, if you're doing esports, there are mandatory aspects of physical education, because that is how you reach the top leagues. Inclusivity. So we mentioned that if pupils have impairments, you're not shoehorning them into playing playing esports. It's just another option. We would have thought that diversity and inclusivity would be the main thing that the opposition was going for. So, also, talking about the specific types of video games, you can choose what game the schools play. The schools can decide. So, for example, Rocket League is a age 3 rated game. So, if you've got an issue with certain tiers of games, you can choose lower rated games age-wise. And also in terms of the environment, well, this is the digital age, this is the way the world is going, and efficiency is increasing year on year. So by not investing in this, by not getting schools on board, you're holding back investment and stifling progress that can be made to make this industry more efficient. So, on to my first point. To begin the comparison, let us outline the health risks posed by esports to pupils. The data so far shows that all identified injuries and health risks from esports are minor, ranging from repetitive strain injuries to lower back pain to eye strain. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but that to me just sounds like a normal day of online studying. These risks can all be yes?
This will be extremely effective because this will occur in lower age categories. So where these injuries might occur very regularly in over 50s categories, these are going to be occurring in teenagers, providing detrimental effects in later life.
So I will just like to respond to that. So then it will be happening in younger children. Yes, as I will go on to say, younger children are already playing these contact sports and other traditional sports anyway. So the comparison is still apt. And what I was about to say is, all of these risks have been proven to be mitigated by proper breaks, exercise, and appropriate posture. All of which can be taught to people, and all of which are great skills for the digital age anyway, as Tom said previously. And whilst I may joke about the risks of esports, seeing as they are so minor, the same cannot be said for traditional sports. If I asked you what you think the most dangerous sport for children is, that's anyone under 18, you would perhaps look to American football in the United States, which causes the most contact-related brain bleeds and later on dementia of any sport in adults. Or perhaps martial arts or boxing also don't have similar effects. However, you may be surprised to hear that rugby, Stamford School's premier sport and one enjoyed by many students of all ages and both sexes across the country, is in fact one of the most widely condemned in the medical community. In a series of groundbreaking 2017 papers by Professor Alison Pollock and Pfister et al., published in the British Medical Journal, supported by over 70 doctors, including Dr. Fiona Godley, who is the editor-in-chief of that medical journal, found that rugby had the highest concussion rate in children of any sport, with 4.18 concussions per 1,000 athlete exposures compared to 1.2 in ice hockey and 0.53 in American football. They further added that tackling and scrums pose a great risk of fractures, concussion, dislocated shoulders, spinal injuries and head injuries. So you might have been worried a bit about eye strain, but to me that sounds a lot worse. These conditions can have, and I quote, short-term, lifelong and life-ending consequences for children, the health experts say. I'd wager everyone in this room can think of a serious injury that they or someone else they know has received by playing a contact sport like rugby. I therefore ask the audience why we can accept these immense health risks for our children in the name of traditional team sports and then further proceed to make rugby compulsory in 77% of all schools in the UK that offer it, according to the British Medical Journal, only to then reject esports. Why? As Ralph Waldo Emerson, American essayist, lecturer and philosopher said, what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. Ladies and gentlemen, while the opposition loudly spins a web of deceit about esports, their clear actions in defending of the medically condemned traditional sports like rugby and its compulsory nature in school devalues their critique of esports being added to the curriculum. I ask the opposition why the good people in the audience should disregard medical evidence and then be compelled to listen to your rhetoric of video games are bad that was pushed by progressively out-of-touch media about 10 years ago. However, it's not good enough, ladies and gentlemen, to simply show the danger of the sports in comparison to esports, as that never stopped Stamford School from forming another legendary under-15s E-team. Instead, I prefer to talk money, and you know what they say, the more money, the louder it talks. With data from as early as 2019, the esports industry already had revenues exceeding $1 billion and audiences of more than 443 million across the globe, according to Forbes. That's the following greater than American football and rugby combined. This is an incredible feat of growth and is only to continue, getting an injection of rocket fuel and reaching viewerships of above 645 million when COVID-19 shut the world down in 2020. In line with its popularity, the tournament prize money in esports is increasing at an average rate of 42% a year topping 173 million in 2019. With esports being so young, having only really entered the spotlight in 2018, it is already training viewerships and prize pools with the likes of tennis, hockey and rugby, and is set to surpass sports like basketball in the coming years. These prize pools are, however, only accessible to the best of esports players in the same range of traditional sports. However, the key difference is that even moderately skilled esports players can make a career or a side hustle out of streaming games on platforms such as Twitch or YouTube, as I'm sure many of you in the audience will have seen and will know about. Though the exact revenues vary quite dramatically, for someone known to the esports scene and someone who is even moderately successful, it can range from tens of thousands a year to millions a month. Either way, it provides a backup opportunity that is simply not available to those playing traditional sports, where it is famously said you either make it or you do not, with no halfway house. So, by starting to play these competitive games early as part of an organised team, we can create opportunities, fiscal opportunities for peoples around the country. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, it seems unfathomable that the opposition can oppose the introduction of esports to the school curriculum. Not only is it putting our children at risk of severe medical harm, but also prevents them from accessing a flourishing market. As Elon Musk, a billionaire who said, I can either watch it happen or be a part of it. Let them be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar, for that speech. I now call upon the second speaker from the opposition, Millie, to conclude her case.
Thank you. So I'm the second speaker for the opposition. And firstly, I would like to obviously rebuttal to the opposition today. They have spoken about inclusivity for people with disabilities by playing esports. However, they have failed to mention epilepsy and people with learning disabilities who would not be able to join in activities such as esports because of the severe risk factor involved. They have also talked about in 2018 esports being introduced into the curriculum. However, a psychology report conducted in Norway, published by the National Library of Medicine, found that volunteers who played video games for increased amounts of time experienced suicidal thoughts, depression and anxiety. This is ironic considering it's the first case where it's implemented. I'll firstly talk about mental health, gambling and addiction. Secondly, speak about screen time, and thirdly, the physical consequences that this motion will have. By the end of the debate, it will become clear that the negative outcomes of including esports in the 21st century curriculum far negates the alleged benefits of the proposition claims. Overall, it will disrupt the vital balance that is required for the academic curriculum. We urge you to truly think about how pastoral care can be used properly for children. We do not want to demonise esports as the proposition has falsely claimed about us. Rather, we believe that including it in a proposed obligatory way would be to the detriment of this generation of children. No, thank you. My first point concerns how promotion facilitates poor mental health and addictive behaviours. We make leaps into understanding about mental health, and the education sector's input is vital in this. Therefore, to us, it's alarming and contradictory that schools would endorse esports, which has been proven by the British Medical Journal to have links with poor mental health. And to touch on what Kitty said earlier about values in schools, so this is quoting a British Medical Journal article from 2019. They highlighted the real threat of gambling-like monetisation, and gambling and addictive behaviours are all part of mental health. These have been revealed to almost $30 billion, and the proposition claims about money and how they will value money. How are we valuing money over a child's mental health? This is appalling for the propositions to speak about. A third of children ages 11 to 15 have opened loot boxes, which are part of the gambling schemes, and they are very well hidden.
What information?
No, thank you. So policies promotion will fail to inform you about how esports outside the curriculum have a massive influence. What I just mentioned seems rather harmless until, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you that there's a catch. The gaming industry will vast amounts of money to ensure that kids are addicted. The proposition have backed it up themselves by claiming how much money is in this industry. After all, esports is a business. They don't care about your children, they don't care about you. There will be public outrage if schools use drugs and alcohol during lesson time and promoting this. It's scientific research using an MRI machine concludes images of a person's brain on addictive substances such as crack cocaine and a person's brain on a video game to have the same results. So errors of the striatum of the brain, in biology, they highlight the same way as an MRI scan. And this is further been strengthened through California State University research. In fact, in 2018, Dr. Stefan Saxena, the director of the World Health Organization's Mental Health and Drug Abuse Department, announced that internet gaming disorder was a real problem for our generation. During the 2018 study, nearly 10% of young people who play video games displayed the aforementioned disorder. And this is long term. This is not as the proposition claims the short term risk of injury in physical sports. This will be exposing children to this at a young age, and it will affect the development of their brains. Of course, this occurs in players that play excessive amounts, and not all your friends are zombie-like game addicts, or some of them maybe. But when we put these statistics into, when we contextualise these statistics into our everyday lives, before and after the pandemic, they become too familiar. This brings me on to my second point regarding screen time. I have a question for the audience today. Do you have a disordered relationship with screen time? I won't give you any second to think upon that because I can give you the facts. 90% of you will spend an unhealthy average of 6 hours per day or more on screen time. And this is before the pandemic was even considered, where children are spending 7 hours, 7-hour online school days on their devices. And there's no shock factor to this. We know that we spend far too much time on devices. And the proposition's argument today does not help us kids. Moreover, it's not your fault. This year's cohort has been deeply affected by the pandemic when we have had to go online. Ofcom's 2020 media consumption report said that screen time for esports alone had risen by 40%. And herein lies the issue that this house will promotion today. Our generation desperately requires a break from devices, and the motion is not helping. Ladies and gentlemen, does it make logical sense to introduce esports at a time when real-life sporting opportunities have been fully taken away from children? I'm sure you've all been affected by this. And lastly, my third point builds upon this argument. Amid the global pandemic, Britain's obesity epidemic has been largely forgotten about. But we simply do not understand how the proposition can sit there and deem the motion pragmatic when rising obesity levels are a real threat. Even if the motion were to be optional, as I said, integrated, it would still be taking away a young person's only organised activity for the whole week if they don't play sports outside of school. And this would exacerbate the fact that 1 in 5, 1.7 million children start secondary school obese. Then, considering people spend 3/4 of their day sat down, sedentary, any health expert can tell you quickly that this will reflect in the prevalence of child obesity, heart disease and diabetes. And this is at the cost of our already strained NHS. As we may have heard, the government advising the weigh-ins for school children, which is a debate for another day, but it illuminates the urgency of the situation. Before even contemplating esports in the 21st century curriculum, we need to drastically improve our physical sports system. We must prioritise inclusive physical sports for people of all age classes, and as the proposition expressed, esports does cater to some people with disabilities, but why would we force people with disabilities into a shoebox just because they don't fit our category? We implore you to reject the motion today and not jump on the proposition bandwagon of the digital agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Millie. I would now like to invite members of the House to speak from the floor. Please note that your questions will be recorded, so only pose a question if you're happy for that. With those wishing to ask a question to one or more teams or comment on the motion, please raise their hands, give their first name, and address their remarks through me as Mr. Chairman. Please raise your hands if you have any questions. Lucian.
Well, I'd like to ask the opposition I'd like to ask the opposition on the points of environmental sort of effects of gaming. So as we move into the future, will sort of renewable energy and using energies that are not related to carbon sources, is that going to change how that statistic affects sort of the point of esports in the future?
Any more questions? There's no one I think is common in debate or...
So this is for the proposition. I'm Rafa, and I was going to say, I assume esports is competitive like real life sports. So for the students who have a competitive nature, would you say, obviously I assume they'll go home and practice, which for this means more gaming and more screen time. Do you reckon that could create further imbalances in their life, which if they have a vulnerable mindset already, may not be so positive? Thank you.
Ace on top.
I've got a question for the proposition. How would you address the sort of growth of toxic communities around esports? And do you think that being placed in school would make that worse?
Question on the right-hand side from Mia.
I have a question for the proposition. There's been, as far as I'm aware anyway, there isn't as many esports for female games, especially new founding sports such as netball. So how would esports go to help girls and things like that in new founding sports? As I know there's a lot for male sports, but not so much female.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'd like to call upon the opposition to sum up issues raised in the debate and answer any questions that arose from the floor.
Hello again, I'm still Kitty and I'm going to be summarising for the opposition. Firstly, I'd like to respond to our questions from the floor. So the issue is we're going to have an increase of data centres. And now data centres, after a 2018 Microsoft trial of placing them under the sea, are now going to be predominantly based underwater. And this highly limits our renewable energy options. And we must also question if the renewable energy options are going to come soon enough to help tackle the crisis that we're already under. So now I'd like to identify the main points of clash that I have identified. Number one, where should these esports be included into our curriculum so it's not going to affect our education or our physical education? Our second point of clash was the point of clash about discrimination, and our third was about the supposed benefits of esports. Now, from the very beginning, I have the question, where should we include esports into our curriculum? The proposition have now made it clear that it will be stated as an option. But this is going to be detrimental, as it means that certain students can avoid doing any form of physical education, having catastrophic effects on their physical health and exacerbating the pre-existing obesity crisis. Now, the idea of diversity gives students equal opportunity. Esports brings discrimination in other ways, financial discrimination. Certain students won't be able to afford to do gaming at home, so might fall behind their peers in terms of competition, because if you can't afford to have an Xbox at home and your friends can, then certainly the friends that have the facilities at home is going to exceed your achievements. This isn't the same as football. There are football pitches at local parks, there are tennis courts at local parks. These aren't things that are necessarily come across in terms of traditional sports. There was also a point that was quite rightly raised by Mia in the audience that girls aren't going to want to play games that over-sexualise them and are misogynistic. And also there was a point throughout this debate about whether this was going to be a viable option for disabled students. But we should be fighting to ensure that traditional sports are as inclusive as possible, to ensure that we have future generations of para-athletes, to ensure that Paralympics still go on. There was also a lot of debate about the valuable skills that we learn by doing esports. And whilst the skills learned are undoubtedly desirable, they are practically identical to the skills gained by playing traditional sports, only a fraction of the cost of esports, with arguably better mental and physical health benefits. Despite their claims of high incidence rates with injuries, these are a minority compared to the millions of children who gain valuable physical and mental health benefits. To summarise the opposition's arguments from today, in an age of students being the forefront of social progression, let's guarantee our education system isn't contaminated with regressive and offensive ethics. In an age of such fantastic sporting opportunities for all athletes, regardless of disability, race or gender, let's guarantee our funding is spent providing phenomenal physical education for all. In an age of turmoil surrounding the future of our planet, let's guarantee our schools are playing their parts in stopping global warming and the destruction of the earth. In a year where our NHS and mental health charities like Mindspace have worked tirelessly to help us both physically and mentally, let's not ignore their calls to exercise regularly, to get fresh air and to meet people in a safe manner and environment. Let's guarantee that their words are not only heard and appreciated, but they are acted upon. In a land full of talented sportsmen and women, let's guarantee their talents are fully nurtured to ensure that it will continue to come home for many years. So ladies and gentlemen, to help our NHS and our environment, let's please back the opposition and reject the motion before the House today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitty. I now call upon the proposition to give a summary speech and conclude the debate.
Thanks for the applause. So first I want to answer some of the questions. So there was a question about being competitive, and if you go home, you're going to be more likely to play games at home. How we see it, the sorts of people that will play esports at school will be more than likely to be playing these games at home anyway. So you're just moving that time in an unsupervised environment where they could become addicted to a place where they're going to be supervised by a coach or a teacher, which anything is safer. And we'll come back to sort of addiction now in a moment. We also heard about this sort of toxic behaviour. This toxic behaviour is not going to happen at school if you've got a teacher sitting right behind you. The same way that all sports have a sort of toxic behaviour. We know football has a racism issue. This isn't going to go away. If you subscribe to the idea, it's a systemic part of society. So I don't really understand how esports is this whole discriminatory place, but everything else in society is all brilliant, because we know that's not the place. But I think by doing it under a teacher's nose, you're more likely to learn how to actually act like a human being. But also this idea of it discriminating against women, I think that's another point with the fact that, if anything, esports is more inclusive, because there isn't any preconceived gender ideas like there would be for rugby or cricket or netball for the other way around. I think esports is a platform where we can all play, because there is that almost sense of anonymity between the computer and the people playing this. So obviously I've got a job to pick up the points of clash and to do any rebuttal, because the opposition obviously didn't answer any points of information in their second speech. So I think we want to reiterate for the third or fourth time now that you choose the esports game you play. So if you don't like Overwatch, if you think it sexualises women, which is fair enough, it's a horror game, don't play it. Play Counter-Strike or Rocket League. This whole idea of the economic argument, how it costs a lot of money. Ladies and gentlemen, have you know these things called computer rooms that are scattered all over schools already? You can use them to play these games. Yes, they're not top-end gaming systems, but you can easily play League of Legends or Dota, on what is an integrated graphics card and a processor, more than which the toaster computers are capable to do a standard school. It's also nonsensical when you look at the idea of what it actually costs to get sporting equipment into schools. A lot of money. Yes, it's £500,000 for an Astro, give or take, and that lasts, let's say, 20, 25 years. A computer can still last about 10 years, and it is 10% of the cost of it, much more than less than that. Also, we have a lot of statistics from the opposition. The whole argument was statistics. Statistics that they didn't bring it back up and don't really have any ideas behind them. You have to give a logical argument. And all we heard was these hand grenades, talking points that have been over for the last 20 years, video games, all violence and all this. But obviously, ladies and gentlemen, violence didn't start in the 1980s, 90s when people started playing Pong. Funny enough, violence has been around for a very long time, and it will continue to be. Video games do not influence them in any way, shape or form. We also have this epilepsy warning and how what epileptic people are going to do. They can play traditional sports. We're not forcing them to do one or the other. This is just an option for those people that say in a wheelchair who are unable to play rugby, but we think should learn, and they should learn, these vital skills, or we're giving them an outlet to do so. And those that might not like traditional sports. We have this obesity question coming up a few times. There's still going to be physical activity. You have, for example, your game session, a game of Counter-Strike with your friends, you have another school session that you have to go to, where you go for a run, or you go to the gym, or whatever. This is a pastoral sense of care that the school has a duty to offer, and they will still offer that. We're just giving people another thing to unwind and to learn vital skills. We've also got a whole host of other things, such as gambling. Now, gambling, in terms of loot boxes, that was outlawed last year by the Culture Secretary. There's a whole host of things the opposition have looked over. So, say ladies and gentlemen, I've told you the medical benefits, the economic arguments, how the benefits of curriculum, and the medical arguments for esports. I hope you very much enjoy the debate and vote for the opposition.
We will take a vote. Can I remind you to vote on the persuasiveness of the speakers you have heard this afternoon, not according to your opinion before the debate. You'll be able to vote for three things. Firstly, in support of the motion for the proposition on my right, against the motion for the opposition on my left, or you can abstain. So for those in support of the proposition, please will you raise your hands. In support of the proposition on my right. For those voting against the motion, please will you raise your hands. So the vote gives a win to the opposition, however, it's down to the judges to decide. So I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Sharman to give I'd like to invite Mrs. Sharman to give her adjudication and announce which team has won the debate.
Thank you, Sam. Many thanks to all of our speakers, Sam's chair, and also Olivia's timer this afternoon. And a special thanks goes to Old Oscar, who of course made the effort to return to Stamford this afternoon to take part in the debate. Can we just have one further round of applause for that it's been an afternoon of highly stimulating, incredibly exciting and very, very high standard debate. So well done goes to all of our speakers this afternoon. And as has been alluded to by our speakers as they've come out to deliver to you, it is amazing to see debating back with a live audience. We've missed this, we've been without this for a couple of years now, and this is kind of our first venture back. So it's been great to have you with us, and also to have some interesting questions from the floor as well. I would also, on behalf of Mindspace, our local mental health charity, like to thank anybody who donated this afternoon, and also thank you to Louisa and Abby, who are our charity collectors this afternoon. I'm sure you will all agree, and some of our speakers also alluded to it this afternoon, that mental health charity and support is increasingly vital due to the mental health challenges that have been compounded by recent effects of the pandemic. So thank you to all of you for your contributions, and we're sure that those will be put to very, very good use by Mindspace. So, down to our deliberations then. As judges, we are asked to consider of our speakers three key things. First of all, the content of their speeches, so the arguments they make, the logic of those arguments, the explanation of their points, and the examples of evidence that they use in support. We also need to consider the strategy that is used by the teams, how effectively they work together, how effectively they communicate with one another and one another's ideas, how much they listen to their opposing side, which is very, very important, how effectively they rebut the arguments of the opposition side, and the timing that they keep to as well. A third thing we consider is the style in which the speakers deliver their ideas, their rapport with you as the audience, the language that they use, their body language, their voice, their pace, etc. So, as the judging panel, we agreed this afternoon that all speakers made very good use of evidence throughout the majority of the speeches. They made valid arguments, and most of the time communicated with excellent style. There was good rapport with the audience, there was good use of eye contact, and at points throughout all speeches, there were very impassioned and energetic delivery. All speakers signposted their arguments very well. By that I mean we knew very clearly at the beginning and throughout their speeches what they were going to be discussing with us. We felt that on balance the proposition side, the Old Stamfordians side, were kind of better in terms of their reaction and their rebuttal of the opposition. So there was more response to points of information and potentially a kind of better standard of rebuttal and picking up on opposition arguments and unpicking them. However, on kind of the other side, we felt that the opposition's use of rhetorical questions was very, very effective. We felt that the timing of the speeches on the opposition side was tighter, it was neater, and the final emphatic points were made perhaps with greater delivery and with greater clarity on the opposition side. This was an incredibly difficult debate for us to judge. Feedback from Mr. Nacy, who is our sports expert this afternoon, was the fact that he wanted to have seen sports as a whole, as a collective, not individual traditional sports, but sports as a whole compared to the esports field. What are the benefits of all sports compared to the benefits of esports, and vice versa? What are perhaps the negatives or the problems, risks associated with the two fields? So it was really, really difficult for us. It came down to 1 point. There's around 300 points that the teams can get in order to nudge into that winning position, and there was a difference of only 1 point between the two sides. However, this afternoon, we as the judging panel have decided that this year, for 2021, the Oswald Elliott Cup for debating goes to the Old Stamfordians.
Congratulations to the proposition, and also thank you to them for joining us this afternoon. Thank you also to the audience for supporting Stamford debating and for helping to support Mindspace. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at future debates. As you leave the hall, please donate generously to Mindspace if you haven't already done so, and encourage your parents to access and watch the film version of this debate through the school media channels and donate via our Just Giving page. This house stands adjourned. Thank you.